across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite. He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Well, I don't know about power to the people, but what I do know is this is the last free space in the mainstream media. 3 hours of a university of the airwaves, and it all revolves around you. I need your calls. 0844 499 1000. We're talking Corbyn. We're talking Cameron. We're talking Trump and Hillary. We're talking UKIP and Diane somebody who's just been elected as leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, we'll be talking about him later with John Le Boutillier, the sage from across the ocean, because he's closing the gap. He's just 2% behind in the national polling, and he's ahead by up to 5% in two of the great swing states that deliver huge bumper electoral college votes. And you may recall, just a couple of weeks ago, I opined that I didn't think that Hillary Clinton's health was up to the fight. John Le Boutillier begged to differ, but events over the last few days would tend to suggest that sometimes happens that I'm the one that was right. Now, I have no animus towards the leader of UKIP, Diane James, but I'm going to predict this evening that UKIP is about to move into a sharp decline and ultimate electoral oblivion. I say so because they have achieved their raison d'etre, their purpose, which was to bring about a referendum and to win it, and because the two dominant figures in UKIP, Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks, who's a man with money and a man with ideas and ambitions, too, if you ask me, they're going to start their own party, which will marginalise UKIP. Because UKIP is, as David Cameron once pronounced it, really a collection of fruitcakes underneath Farage. And those fruitcakes got off to a flying start today, where the brand new leader banned the leader of UKIP on the Welsh National Assembly from the stage and cancelled his 15-minute address, putting instead the man he had defeated for the leadership of UKIP in Wales and who has just resigned from the UKIP group. Eccentric? Well, you decide. And we'll be talking about David Cameron himself, because he's just hightailed it out of Parliament. We shall not see him again, at least not in the House of Commons. Having said that he would stay on as Prime Minister, whatever the result of the EU referendum, he resigned the next morning. Having said when he resigned that he would remain the Member of Parliament for the constituency in Oxfordshire that had served him so loyally, he's now ditched them too and done a runner, no doubt, onto the same kind of circuits as his hero Tony Blair before him. But the timing was interesting, because his resignation was tendered just 24 hours before the Foreign Affairs Select Committee delivered a devastating indictment on his war on Libya. Now, you may recall that I was right about that too. I said that whatever the shortcomings, eccentricities, downright lunacies, crimes and misdemeanours of Colonel Gaddafi, destroying Libya and putting a collection of Looney Tune fanatic extremists in his place and destroying what was left of the state structures in Libya would turn out to be a disaster. And so it has. There are now not one Libyas, 3 Libyas exist now. In fact, 4 prime ministers in 3 separate administrations, all calling themselves the government. None of them has an army. All of them have a collection of heavily armed militias who use the hardware that they've got to murder each other on an industrial scale. Libya is now a collapsed state, which would be a matter of some regret in itself, but given that it has a Mediterranean coastline and is therefore a gateway to the European mainland, well, that's a blunder as well as a crime. We'll be talking about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but I want to spare a few minutes to talk about the Labour Party, because the voting finishes on Wednesday and the result will be announced at noon on Saturday. The purge that we've been speaking about over these last few weeks here on the mother of all talk shows has begun to reach farcical proportions. Some people have been not just suspended and deprived of their vote, but expelled from the Labour Party because they were friends of mine. Others have been banned from voting because they retweeted tweets issued sometimes years before by members of the Green Party. Some have been banned for actions that predated their joining of the Labour Party in the first place. Clement Attlee, the great Labour post-war Prime Minister's great-nephew, has been expelled from the Labour Party. Constituency chairmen and women, constituency secretaries, councillors, eminent, prominent, local councillors have all been purged, and the purge is in the tens of thousands. Now, one of the renegades, a man called Neil Coyle, who's of the manor just next to me here now in Southwark, he threatened to sue Jeremy Corbyn for defamation. I'm not making this up. Just a day or two ago, because he'd been named in a list as one of those who's never off the media slandering Jeremy Corbyn. Let me tell you something, Neil, as somebody who knows a thing or two about the laws of defamation. If you're constantly attacking someone and they name you as someone who has constantly attacked them, that is not defamation, because the ultimate defence to the tort of defamation is veritas, otherwise known for those without a classical education as the truth. Now, I believe that unless this purge has been on such an industrial scale as to make a laughingstock of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn is going to win comfortably, not least because most people, most fair-minded, objective observers, realise that the fellow that they put up against him just wasn't up to the job. But they're not giving up. Not they, nor their backers, the principal of whom is the BBC. Last night on BBC Question Time, we had a scandalous episode of media bias on a state broadcaster paid by the public on pain of imprisonment that I haven't seen since, well, that time they set me up on the same programme up in Hendon a year or two ago. It was a scandal. The Goebbels of Tony Blair, Alistair Campbell, was allowed to ride roughshod over the chairman, David Dimbleby, over all norms of question time debating. He was allowed to flail and throw out the most vile abuse against the Labour leadership, of which he is still a member. Alistair Campbell's in the Labour Party. I'm out of it. So's Ken Livingstone. And Tony Blair's still in it too. Well, we'll be talking about some of these absurdities, but let me bring you some news you may not know. There's a special panorama on Monday looking at left-wing infiltration into the Labour Party, looking at alleged anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, looking to subvert, for the last time before the voting closes, the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell and the other general staff of the Labour Party. Now, I'm going to say to you now, and I'm going to say to Jeremy Corbyn through this microphone, it's time to get tough with the BBC. The private broadcasters you can't do anything or not much about. They do what their owner wants them to do. But the owner of the BBC is the public, and the government and the opposition in Parliament have a legal right to fair and equitable treatment on the BBC, and no one, not even the most slavish supporter of the BBC, could possibly claim that that is what has been exercised over these last months in relationship to the leadership of the Labour Party. So we'll be talking Corbyn. We've asked Wally, of course. We've looked for him. We've been looking for Wally, but we haven't yet found him. And, well, frankly, it's now too late, because after Saturday at noon, Wally will be a nobody. He'll be an ex-Wally. He'll be a dead parrot. Where's Wally? Who cares? It's the mother of all talk shows.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. You can also text and email and, of course, tweet. You can tweet me at George Galloway, or you can tweet us at Talk Radio, or preferably both. Now, let me clarify something in relation to some of the tweets that are already coming in. I'm not saying that the idea of UKIP is going to go away. I'm saying that the party called UKIP is on the road to oblivion. I dare say it will be replaced in part, maybe in whole, by the new formation that I'm certain that Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks have up their sleeve. The fruitcakes that they've left behind are in such a state of perverse eccentricity that you wouldn't send them out to buy a loaf of bread. The leader of the party, just elected, promptly banned the leader of UKIP in Wales, Neil Hamilton, from his speaking slot of 15 minutes tomorrow, and replaced him by the guy he defeated for the leadership of UKIP in Wales. And then she banned all of her rival candidates from their brief speaking slots, thanking people for voting for them and expressing their views about how the party should go ahead. Now, in the tumult that is, and believe me, it is chaos down there, in the tumult that is the UKIP conference, I managed to get a hold of my former parliamentary colleague Neil Hamilton, the aforementioned leader of UKIP in Wales. Take a listen to what he said. Neil, if Pitt was to Addington as London is to Paddington, what is Diane James to Nigel Farage?
Well, she can't possibly fill the void that he leaves behind. Nobody could, because he's a dynamic force, as you know, and he has achieved what nobody that I can recall having achieved, having been a member of Parliament, changing the political weather in this country. So nobody could follow that convincingly, in my view. But we need a different kind of leadership, which is more collegiate, more of a team than was possible under Nigel, who was a sort of super dominant alpha male. What worked for him isn't going to work for anybody else.
Well, it's not been a great start on the old collegiate front, has it? You've been purged off the speaking list. Your 15 minutes has been reduced to 0, and the defeated candidates are not, after all, to be given their chance to have their say.
No, well, it's very bizarre. Diane James was saying in her acceptance speech earlier on today that she wanted to unite the party and bring people together. Doesn't seem to me to be the way to go about doing that. She may have concluded, in my case, that there was too much excitement at the conference anyway, and they needed a bit of sedative, so they brought on Nathan Gill, who has just resigned from the UKIP group in the Assembly in Cardiff, and have him on rather than its leader. So I don't understand it, and I've certainly not been given any reason. In fact, I've not even officially been told I'm not speaking.
Well, if I were you, I'd just go up to the microphone. You might find you're on air. But
I've always wanted to take a leaf out of your book, George.
Now, Neil, all of this, if you don't mind my saying so, adds to the feeling held not abroad in the literal sense, but in the polity, that it's a bit eccentric, UKIP, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is of no great significance in the grand scheme of things. It's just a UKIP conference. It's not going to change the political weather or even come to the consciousness of 99.9% of the people of this country. We have changed political weather by taking us out of the EU, in which you played a distinguished part, I'm pleased to say. And in Wales, I will remain the leader of the group in the Assembly, and we're livening things up there, as you would do if that happy opportunity came for you to become a member too. We're fighting real politics in Wales on real domestic issues, and we'll carry on doing that. Nothing changes in reality.
Well, the UKIP poll results and their achievement in the referendum can't be gainsaid, but the suspicion lingers that Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks haven't quite retired from political activity and may indeed be ready to pull a new rabbit out of the hat, rendering UKIP odious.
Well, that's always possible, of course. Nigel certainly is not going to retire or go away. He announced today, in fact, he was going to continue as the leader of the pan-European group that UKIP belongs to in the European Parliament, and he has brilliantly used the platform of the European Parliament in a way that nobody else has been able to make an international name for himself. Aaron Banks has only been in the party for 5 minutes, and I'm always suspicious of very rich people who think that they can buy political parties and use them as playthings. He has been responsible for posting a lot of vulgar abuse about me and others on social media, and I don't think that vulgarians really attract people to a political party. But I don't think that's going to matter too much.
So you don't think they're going to set up a rival, in other words?
Well, they might do, because Banks has been talking about setting up something like the five-star movement in Italy, but the difference is that Italy has a proportional representation system based on single transferable vote, which really destroys the power of big parties and establishment parties to control the entry to their profession. That doesn't exist in this country. The big parties will continue to dominate the scene, although the UKIP has broken the mould in many ways, and the nationalist parties, of course, in their respective jurisdictions have broken the old consensus as well. So I don't think it is going to be as easy as they might think, just by applying lots of money to something and the use of computers to create a political movement that means anything.
Well, finally, when will the country get to know Diane James, and what surprises can we look out for?
Well, I think we've learned something today, not something that I was looking forward to learning. But, she will go through a bit of a baptism of fire, I think, in the media. And it remains to be seen how she can cope in comparison with Nigel Farage. It's a difficult act to follow, and you would think she'd want to have the maximum amount of internal support from her own party. It's going to be an interesting experience. I think we'll find out quite quickly whether she's up to it or not.
And you'll still be on board, notwithstanding being banished from the microphone tomorrow?
Oh, I'm going nowhere, George. I'd much rather be on your microphone than any other. And, I have my regular platform as the leader of UKIP in the Welsh Assembly, and that may not sound much to people who are not in Wales, but it matters to me. That's what I'm there to do, to make a difference in the land of my birth. And I'm very happy doing that job. And I think that we are going to make a difference to the political culture in Wales.
Well, that was Neil Hamilton talking in the wake of himself having been purged, at least from the conference. He's, of course, quite experienced and quite formidable political operator, but Diane James is not. And I've just looked at her picture on the television and can say to you, with my hand on my heart, I've never set eyes on her before. I have never heard her name before. And she hasn't made a very good start if the idea is a collegiate leadership in the wake of the super-dominant alpha male that was Nigel Farage, as described by Neil Hamilton. So if you've got any views on UKIP, 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. Coming up later, we're talking, of course, about Corbyn, about Cameron, about Trump and Hillary, about the National Health Service, health being an issue, of course, now emerging very strongly indeed in the US presidential election, but not yet as it should in British politics, where the leaders of the NHS in England have just said that the NHS is on the verge of collapse. Coming up after me, after 10 o'clock, is Ian Lee, a great broadcaster. Stay tuned when I'm finished, but I've still got a long way to go.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
We will. 0844 499 1000. Now, the galère of people, from the Human League guitarist to the grand-nephew of Clement Attlee, the grandest of all Labour leaders, have all been purged, thousands of them, from voting in the Labour leadership election. If there was any fairness, any scintilla of justice, this would be a major political story in every single part of the British media. If Corbyn was purging thousands of supporters of Owen Smith, do you think you'd ever hear the end of it? But it's not just people who are famous, although my first caller has become, over the last couple of years, actually quite famous. She is the Essex Socialist. She runs a blog on Facebook and on Twitter, a collective of people. She's been bumped out of the Labour Party for something one of the collective said, not her, and not given any opportunity to appeal. And the punishment is because she's a friend of mine. Christina in Essex, welcome
Hello,
to the
George.
show. Hi. Now,
Hello.
just tell
Hi.
the listeners how this all came about.
Well, it came as a bit of a surprise, really, because as you know, I'm very active locally at grassroots level. So, I've got a lot of very close comrades and very supportive of me. And I just, I'd been out with them last Thursday night. So we'd been on a UK Labour fundraising evening. Everything was great. And then I just received this letter on Saturday morning, well, an email really, with no evidence at all, just to say that I had been expelled from the party for, they say, campaigning for you. during the mayor elections. No, I didn't.
But you didn't. You campaigned against me. You were out campaigning for Sadiq Khan, the Labour mayor of London.
The crazy thing is, there's photographic evidence that Sadiq Khan himself has on his Twitter account, if you scroll back, and he actually comes to visit Harold's Wood to look at the Crossrail and to really just encourage us to get out and campaign. I'm there in the photo with him. I'm also out with Jeremy Corbyn when he came to Dagenham, and I was out campaigning that day. So I'm in the photographs there. There's so many photographs of me actually out campaigning, which makes it even more laughable.
And this email didn't give you any evidence.
No.
On the basis of which you have been not just suspended, but as I understand it, expelled.
No, I've been expelled.
But how can you be expelled without a hearing, without charges being put to you, without the ability to answer them? You can't be expelled, surely, on the basis of a simple email.
It gave a date, but it didn't give any evidence. But as you know, George, the Essex Socialists started on Facebook as a small group because there was, not really any socialism or socialist groups within Essex. So I started it, and I have, a couple of admins. There's a small team of us. I don't work alone. And, the post could, have been put up by them. Pretty much it's definite that it was, so I don't work alone. So, I mean, it's not even in my own name. So the Essex Socialists is a group. Do you see what I mean? So it's not even in my own personal name. So they can't say, there's no proof that I posted anything because it's not even in my own personal name. It's in the name of the group.
Well, not only is there no proof that you posted anything supportive of me, there are pictures of you with Sadiq Khan, with Jeremy Corbyn,
with
campaigning against me. This will not stand any kind of examination. And I know that Jeremy Corbyn is aware of your case. And this is one of thousands that are going to have to be dealt with after this, including my own case. As you know, I'm demanding that my expulsion over the Iraq war be lifted. They cannot possibly be allowed to ride roughshod over basic principles of natural justice, never mind the law. What about natural justice and Labour Party, Labour movement justice? They can't get away with this. Do you know... Now, of course, all of this takes place with the backdrop that you are one of the few Labour people still active in Essex.
Very active, very, very active. We're out quite often.
I saw you last weekend. You were out campaigning to save the Art Deco cinema.
Yeah, save the towers. But also we were out the week before encouraging, local people to join Labour. So we're out all the time. We're out again tomorrow. They're out again tomorrow. So it's just so stupid. And the only thing is, what I find most ridiculous, George, is that they give that date, but a couple of weeks later, I'd gone through selection panels because, as you know, I was shortlisted to run for council for Havering. So that makes it even more laughable that I got through the selection panel. So I don't know how they can throw this at me now.
Well, I do, because they know that you intended to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. 99% or more of those who've been purged were Corbyn supporters. We know that it's thousands. They refuse to say how many thousands. Their game is either to cheat Jeremy Corbyn of victory or to so reduce the margin of his victory as to break both his legs, politically speaking, so that he stumbles on and they get rid of him the next time. It's so obvious, a blind man could see it.
Oh, I totally agree. But, obviously I'm still here supporting Jeremy, and I will appeal whatever action I have to take, and however loud I have to shout, they will hear, because I rang them the other day, and whoever I spoke to, the lady I spoke to, got my details up and said, in your case, you cannot appeal. Well, I'm just not satisfied with that at all.
That just doesn't hold up. There's no organisation in the entire country that would be allowed to expel someone from their ranks, especially in these circumstances, with no appeal procedure. I've got to tell you, I was broken-hearted when I saw your picture with Sadiq Khan campaigning for Labour against me because we're friends. You hurt my feelings. And for you to be expelled on this ludicrous pack of lies is just preposterous. Christina, tell people how they can join your group, the Essex Socialists.
Well, the Essex Socialists, we're a small closed group on Facebook. It's only about 165 of us. Obviously, we've got grown good awareness on Twitter, but, we keep that quite small so that it's more personal. So anyone can join on the Essex Socialists on Facebook or follow me on Twitter.
Christina, the best of luck. I'm sure we'll be talking again. Thanks very much for joining us. Julian Yu says, UKIP won't disappear if Smithy wins the Labour leadership, and he persists with his silly second EU vote, but hopefully he won't. He won't, Julian. Will he?
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio!
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
I'm here all right every Friday night, actually, between 7 and 10, and you can always call me on 0844 499 1000, or you can, of course, tweet me, as has You Made Me Miss. UKIP did the job of making controlled immigration a topic for debate, not just hate. So applause, and now bugger off. I suspect that's what's going to happen. Phase 1 of UKIP is over, says Freedom, ! Phase 2 is just beginning. UKIP to eclipse the Lib Lab con within 5 years. Mark my words. I've marked them, Mark, and if God spares me and I'm here in 5 minutes, I promise you, I'll make a fool of you. Chris Askew says wrong. I'm Labour and will switch to UKIP in a trice if Corbyn persists with his open-door immigration policy. I think you'll be pushed to find UKIP in a few years' time. That's my prediction. Remember, you heard it here. Hello, George. Owen Smith comes across as an oily rag, and Alistair Campbell is probably one of them, keeping him lubricated, says Colin. I better not go too far down that road. Con Creedon says you could apply the same critic to our state broadcaster, RTE, Ireland Establishment Echo Chamber, yet socially funded. I'm sure that that's true. Now, there's a deluge of people, understandably, because thousands have been purged, who are now contacting us about their own stories in the great Labour purge of 2016. One of them is Peter in Wigan, and he's up next. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, hi, George.
Hi, tell us what happened to you.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I joined the Labour Party for the first time ever on the same day that Jeremy Corbyn was elected.
Yeah, a lot of people did.
Yeah, because I saw hope in the fact that the Labour Party would be restored to its original roots. Within a couple of months, I was expelled. And I received a letter from the NEC saying that I'd been expelled and I had no right of appeal. I phoned them and badgered them, and eventually they allowed me an appeal. And I found out that I was expelled on the basis of a pack of lies from the Labour Party constituency led by Wigan Council leader Lord Peter Smith, who actually libelled me and slandered me by accusing me of physically attacking a Conservative candidate, which I would never do, but if I had, he wouldn't be still standing, and at an election count when the police were present and everything else. And on the basis of that, the NEC, this tribunal, confirmed the expulsion. And as far as I'm concerned, the only reason I was expelled was because I supported Jeremy Corbyn. And that's my story for you.
Well, I'm grateful for it. Thanks very much, Peter. Others can give us theirs, 0844 499 1000. Trotsky says, spot on, George, on UKIP. UKIP in decline as the smart ones flee the sinking ship. but Corbyn holds the key. I think that's right. John Joe says, do you think the gerrymandering is worth it if it means mandatory deselection of the plotters? Well, this is obviously not a matter for me, but if my advice was sought, I would separate out the worst offenders, and I would expel them from the Labour Party. You don't need me to name them. They're on the television, on the radio, in the newspapers, with monotonous regularity. That's a small number of people. Everybody will be up for reselection if the Boundary Commission's proposals go through, because every constituency in the country is about to be altered. And when it's altered, then different people have the right to challenge each other for the nomination. They've been trying to reselect Jeremy Corbyn. So reselection's in their blood, in their genes. The MPs, from the day and hour that Corbyn was elected, have been seeking to have him deselected. So if it's good enough for them in relation to their leader, what's wrong with them having to face reselection from their own members? After all, their own members are the ones that got them elected and will be expected to get them elected in the future. Now, that again, I believe, will affect a relatively few people. Larger number, but a relatively few people. And I appeal now to decent, ordinary Labour members of Parliament to use the opportunity of this confirmed electoral mandate, which we all expect Corbyn to get, to call off the dogs, to call off this foolish and damaging coup. I see people on the television. I saw one the other day. His name was Kyle. I've never heard of him before. He's the MP for Hove, apparently, with a wafer-thin majority, I might add. And the things he said about Jeremy Corbyn frankly rendered him unsuitable to be a member of the Labour Party. They quite clearly, in big capital letters, his interview, which Sky played endlessly throughout the day, brought the Labour Party into disrepute. In short, what he was saying was that whatever the members decide next Saturday, a week on Saturday, that will not change anything. That he has no confidence in Corbyn now, he won't have any confidence next Saturday, or the Saturday after that, and he's going to continue saying so. Now here's the point. When the general election comes, this man has to go to the electors and ask them to vote Labour in order to put Jeremy Corbyn into Downing Street, having told the voters for 5 whole years, that Corbyn is some kind of turkey, that Corbyn is not fit to be the leader of the Labour Party and is not fit to be the Prime Minister. So what are you going to say to the voters? Vote for the guy that I've told you for 5 years isn't fit to be the Prime Minister. Some of them even use the T word, call Corbyn a traitor, not making that up. A traitor because of his foreign and defence policies, which are widely shared. How can such people then go and ask people to vote Labour at the next general election? So these kind of candidates are signing their own political death warrant. But I believe, I pray, I hope, I plead that the majority of Labour MPs will now call off the dogs and return to doing their job, will take positions, if offered them, from the leader, the elected, twice elected leader, and get on with opposing the Conservative government, which is there for the taking. Corbyn gave a good political hiding to the Prime Minister this week in the House of Commons on the issue of grammar schools that we talked about last Friday. It was a tour de force by Corbyn. He absolutely destroyed the Conservative argument, so much so that even some of his worst enemies were cheering. That's what can be achieved if everyone unites and pulls together. And if they don't, frankly, they're on a one-way ticket out. Here's Steve in Nuneaton on this very question. Go ahead, Steve.
Good evening, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good, thanks.
Pleasure to speak to you this evening, George. I'm absolutely astounded by the dogs of the press, George. It's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, that programme that you were mentioning last night, the Question Time programme, was absolutely... It was amazing that you could see such abuse and ad hominem attack given to one person.
Yeah, it was
a concerted effort.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. It was a mob. It was a mob. It was every person on the panel against the Shadow Chancellor.
It was, George. It was strange how all we see is rampant, rabid abuse being hurled by people who are protesting about vague allegations of abuse. Yeah. And then, laughably, they're calling for unity from people being openly, aggressively divisive.
Yes. It's unbelievable. I must say, I thought that MacDonnell handled it with gentlemanly poise. He was very civilised. He was calm and collected. And any fair-minded person watching would feel sorry for him up against that mob.
Yes, I think so. And I mean, some of the things that they were saying to him about a nasty piece of work and him and his gang, referring to Mr. Corbyn as steptoe.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, for any of your younger listeners, George, I mean, steptoe was an old, unwashed rag and bone man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely appalling for the leader of the opposition.
And one Labour MP, Anna Turley, whoever she is, tweeted this morning to Paul Mason, the famous economist and financial journalist. She said that Anna Soubry, the Tory MP on Question Time, had spoken the truth about McConnell. And she chided Mason for propping up this disgrace. So here we have a Labour MP calling her own leader, her own Shadow Chancellor, a disgrace, and backing a scandalous attack on the Labour leaders by a Tory MP, and expecting to be able to continue as a Labour MP into the next election. You couldn't make that up, Steve.
No, you couldn't. I mean, the double standard of these so-called party elites is absolutely astounding. I mean, normally what they say is you're purged and you can't be in the party because you are abusive, or you use foul language, or you're disloyal to the party. That seems to be the main reasons that they give. And yet, look at those that list like Jez Phillips telling Diane Abbott she can F off.
Yep. Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Double standards doesn't even begin to describe it. It's organised hypocrisy. And the conspiracy in the so-called mainstream media in support of it is an absolute disgrace, an absolute scandal.
It really, really is, George. I mean, we mentioned that about the boundary changes. Now much more of it has come to light. It appears like there's going to be at least 30 Labour seats which are going to be dissipated away. I'm not exactly sure, George, but I think it would mean that Cameron's...
Whitney.
Cameron's majority, if it was in force now, would have gone from 12 to 30.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're basically saying. If I can recall correctly what was said the other night, I didn't hear all of it, George.
Yeah, well, that's roughly the shape of it. Steve, thanks for the call. That was Steve in Nuneaton. If you want to call, it's 0844 499 1000. We're discussing UKIP, discussing Corbyn. We're going to be discussing Cameron and Libya and the scathing attack on the Libyan war made by a House of Commons Select Committee this very week. And talking, of course, about Trump and Hillary. It's George Galloway. It's the mother of all talk shows, and therefore it's on Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Talk Radio. For those about to talk, we salute you. Talk Radio.
It is the mother of all talk shows because it's Friday night and I'm here every Friday night between 7 and 10. We're talking about everything that's happening in the world of politics and maybe a wee bit of culture thrown in. There's a lot of people asking for the Foo Fighters. I don't know if Edward is of a mind to oblige, but we've talked about UKIP, we've talked about Corbyn, we're talking about the Purge, and we're talking about Hillary. Will she even make it to the starting line? It's George Galloway. My number is 0844 499 1000.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Listener comrades of the world, unite!
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
We will if you call me 0844 499 1000. We're talking about the political scene across the oceans. And we're about to talk to a man who knows about the crisis in the National Health Service. There was sadness throughout the service when Jeremy Hunt was told that normal service would resume after Theresa May did her cabinet reshuffle. Since then, Jeremy Hunt, and I'm choosing my words carefully, has been a complete disaster. And the service is upside down, up in arms, and on the point of collapse. We'll be talking about that right after this.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, the heads of the NHS in England warned a week or so ago that the service was on the brink of collapse. In a sane world, that would be a cause for a major national debate. Indeed, almost nothing could be of greater import. The National Health Service, relied upon by almost all of our people, from the cradle to the grave, valued by almost all of our people, greater than any other British institution, the jewel in the crown of our British civilization for what it is on the brink of collapse, claim the people who run it. Now, I haven't noticed any great sense of urgency on the political scene about that, and even less in the newspapers and on the mainstream media. So let's talk to Roy Lilly, who's a former NHS Trust chairman, about the crisis, including the crisis over Jeremy Hunt's weekend effect claims. Roy, thanks very much for joining us.
Good evening, George. Good evening.
Good evening. Just survey, if you would, how bad things are.
Well, they're as bad as I've known them, I think. I've been in and around the NHS since the late 70s. Money is really very tight. There's a staffing crisis. In 2010, the then coalition government had started their austerity economics. They cut most public services, and the NHS got a small amount more, about 0.1% uplift per annum for the 5-year spending cycle between 2010 and 2015. Now, every year, as you'll know, the demand for NHS services goes up by around 4%. It's starting to creep up above 4% now, but we'll stick with 4. So you don't have to be an economic genius to realise that if you've got a 1% uplift in your money and 4% growth in demand, there's a big gap. Well, between 2010 and 2015, that gap was about 20 billion. The NHS kind of struggled to make it up. They got to about 19 billion and gave up. And now we're in the new spending cycle, which is 2015 to 2020. The NHS has to find 30 billion in this spending cycle. The government have stumped up about 10 billion up front from the total allocation for this spending cycle. And that's gone to pay off debts and sort out overheating local health economies. Some of it's being reserved for transformation and sustainability, and money is like the song says, is too tight to mention.
Yeah, and it's not just the money, Roy, is it? There's the reorganisations, there's the demoralisation amongst the staff, and that's demonstrated most graphically at the moment, though by no means exclusively, by the crisis with the junior doctors and the so-called 7-day NHS.
Well, yeah, I mean, where do you want to start on that? Let's start with the 7-day NHS. I mean, I think that all of us know that when we go to a hospital on a Sunday, it has a different look and a feel to a hospital on a Tuesday. You've only got to look at the staff car park to see that. And anyone who's ever had a relative admitted on a Friday night knows that they get looked after, but they get, to all intents and purposes, parked until Monday morning when the whole thing kicks off again. So we know there is a weekend effect of sorts. Now, the medical opinion is divided about the extent to which that has a knock-on effect on the safety and well-being of patients. Some people say that it is the cause of unnecessary deaths. Others say, well, these are very frail people, they may have died anyway, and the evidence is kind of flaky. But I think common sense tells you that the NHS is different at the weekends. Now, in the midst of all that, for some inexplicable reason, which I don't know anybody who can give a really sensible answer to this, we've ended up with the Secretary of State, Jeremy Hunt, having a fight with junior doctors and their contract, and praying in aid of his reasons for wanting to change the contract, the fact that junior doctors need to work weekends. Well, it's crazy. We all know they work weekends.
Yes. So, I mean, where is that one going?
Well, the junior doctors have balloted for 3 more series of strikes. One was in September, which they've called off, one in October, one in November. Now, the important thing here, George, is that these are not just one-day strikes. They're coming out for 5 days at a time, walking out of emergency care. That means that the consultants will have to abandon effectively their jobs and go and prop up A&E and places like that, and it will absolutely cripple the NHS. I mean, the waiting lists already have been increased simply by the fact the NHS beds are bunged up because social services can't help us get elderly, frail people home. So some of what we call the elective procedures, that's things like hips and knees and cataracts and hernias and stuff that we're on a waiting list for, they're all getting parked, and the waiting lists are getting longer and longer, and I think the NHS has pretty much given up on waiting list targets. So if you have a strike of 5 days out of a month, then I think the NHS will be on its knees. And so where's it going? Well, my guess is that the medical profession as a whole is kind of frightened of the consequences of this. There's no question about it. The junior doctors were sat on by the BMA and their senior colleagues to pull back on the strike that was planned in September, and I do believe that the chief executive of the NHS, Simon Stevens, personally intervened with the head of the BMA and said, look, if you do this, we will not be able to cope. We haven't got enough time to plan. So I think there's a kind of worry amongst senior doctors that this actually will push the NHS over the edge. In terms of the contract, what are the outstanding issues? Well, I don't believe that they're irresolvable. I think that they are sort of bits and pieces that can be sorted out. And a strike, I think, would be shown under these circumstances to be entirely disproportionate. So my guess is common sense will prevail.
Now, Jeremy Hunt seems to glide across it all rather serenely as a swan. Is he paddling like hell underneath? I mean, is he doing anything to bring this under control?
Well, I think he is. I mean, what's interesting to me is we've got a new Prime Minister, Theresa May, and she, once she sorted her cabinet out, she got rid of a lot of well-known names, and she could easily have got rid of Jeremy Hunt.
That would have been a standout, obvious thing to do, even if you liked him. You could have had a fresh start.
Exactly. Well, you're a sort of a political veteran. You know exactly how it works. You say to someone, look, you've had a good run at this. You're the longest serving Secretary of State for Health. But, we've got a lot of intractable problems. Let's get somebody else in there with a fresh pair of eyes, and perhaps we can row back on some of the stuff that you can't row back on. But she didn't do that. And he wants the job. I mean, I've spoken to him, I've interviewed him about the job, and I think he, whatever you may think of his politics, I think he genuinely has a feel for the NHS and wants to make a success of it. Now, of course, he's made a complete mess of the junior doctors thing, but she's kept him in place, and she went out of her way. A couple of weeks ago, she was visiting a car factory, and she was asked by journalists about the NHS and the strike, and she said, I've got full confidence in the Secretary of State, which is a bit like, I suppose, the chairman talking about a Premier League football manager, but nevertheless, he's there, and she has staked her political reputation on it because, as you say, she could have got rid of him. As it is, she's gone out of her way to support him.
Well, that you see, is now two big issues, hot potatoes, that she's put, therefore, on her own desk. One is the grammar school issue, where she's clearly out in front as the leader of it, even though it doesn't have majority support in the House of Commons, and her backing of Jeremy Hunt. She may be lining up a series of problems that will, in the end, prove very damaging for her. That's my take.
Well, I think I think you could be right, because she's what I would call a soft Brexiter. She's been pretty clever in putting the key protagonists for Brexit in the key positions to deliver it. Fox, I think, has had very little experience as a cabinet minister. Davis is as kind of Machiavellian as it gets, and Boris, again, is as much as he may be a huge character, he's very inexperienced, and one wonders if she's put those three people in, the three musketeers, in to fail. I mean, that's not an impossible scenario. So she has only a very slender majority. Let's not forget that it's a small majority, and I think the Tory party is still split pretty much down the middle over whether to Brexit or not. And so you're right, she's walking a political tightrope.
Well, of course, sometimes the tightrope walker makes it across, and other times they fall off. Roy Lilly, thanks very much for joining us. Former NHS Trust Chairman Roy Lilly, a man who knows what he's talking about on the NHS. So that's another ball in play now in the mother of all talk shows this evening. If you want to talk about that, it's 0844 499 1000, or, as I say, you can tweet me, as hundreds appear to be doing. Generic name on the Labour purge says, worse still is to be expelled by someone sitting behind a spreadsheet with thousands of names. Well, let me tell you that one of the very few, it's a very small group, of people who are sitting with a spreadsheet of thousands of people's names is a member of the National Executive that's just been voted off, who is an open supporter of Owen Smith, has just been voted off the National Executive, but in the few weeks left of her term is sitting there with a spreadsheet with thousands of names on it. Now, if I were the leader, I'd be in there insisting on knowing, A, exactly how many people have been purged, and B, the reasons why. And if they didn't give it to me, I'd hand them their P45. Kathleen Ann says double standards with the purge are rife. Smith supporters openly applauding and RTing Tory Anna Soubry on Twitter. That's a fact, including Labour MPs. That's cheering her for describing their own Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer as a nasty piece of work, who's involved in the leadership of a gang. You really couldn't make it up. George, these so-called Labour members and supporters, it's all about Labour's aims and values, huh? Indeed, Kathleen, you're right. Haravik says we can only hope UKIP disappears. Before Farage ditched their manifesto, it was terrifyingly right-wing. And Farla Hines says that fact alone is proof positive that double standards are at play here, as the media turns a Nelsonian eye to it.
Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it?
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000. You call us, we'll call you back. So it'll hardly cost you anything at all. Now, Mark in Liverpool only follows the media when he's in prison. So he's obviously at large at the moment, because he wants to take issue with me over question time. Mark, what have you got to say?
Hello, George. Yeah, listen, I'm absolutely fuming with you, mate, and I'll tell you now, and I'll tell you why, and I'm absolutely a bit gutted with you, to tell you the truth. Anyway, I want to say to Christine earlier, good luck with your appeal, girl, and I'm right behind you all the way. So good luck there. Let's get back to question time first, George.
Yeah.
Let's say it how it happened. How it started, right? Campbell was totally passive towards McDonnell, totally passive. As soon as Shoebury opened her mouth, right, and called him what he did, McDonnell responded. He didn't respond to Shoebury. He went straight for Campbell. And that's when things went downhill. He didn't attack the Tory, he just dissed them. The abomination that is Anna Shoebury. He didn't attack her, went straight to Campbell. And as far as everyone ganging up on him, wait a minute, no one was ganging up on him, but why would you expect any favours off the SNP? Or Quinton Letch. McDonnell brought that on himself, beside the abomination, let's forget it. And I'm just disappointed you haven't said it. How question time happened last night.
Well, I follow question time a lot, and I've been on it a lot, and I know how it works. And that panel was carefully chosen for a gang up on John McDonnell. The panel member was allowed to insult McDonnell in a way that would not be permitted in Parliament. You would not be permitted in Parliament to say about McDonnell what she said about him on question time, which is supposed to be a kind of Parliament monkey. And Campbell, far from being passive, was belligerent, malevolent. He's never been passive in his puff, Mark. He doesn't even ask for a cup of tea in a passive way. He was there to be a part of a gang-up on McDonnell. And it's only McDonnell's gentlemanly pursuit of truth and justice, McDonnell's politeness and his parliamentary manners that allowed him to come out ahead, in my view.
Yeah, but George, that's not the reading of it. That's not what happened, mate. And we can disagree on that. Shoebury, as I said, the abomination should have been attacked. McDonnell shouldn't have went straight for Campbell. He should have went for there, and that's the problem. Not attacking the Tories enough. And let me say this to you, I'm going to stick up for Owen Smith here. And don't get me wrong, he's not my main man, but he's nothing to do with me. I haven't got a candle lit for him. But let's just put things into perspective.
But you're hoping that he wins.
Listen, I'll tell you, I am hoping that he wins.
Well, don't say you're not holding a candle for him. You are hoping that he'll win. You are holding a candle.
George, there's two candidates. It's one or the other.
Yeah, and you're backing one of them, so just admit it that you're backing one of them.
Yeah, I am backing one of them, yeah.
All right. Well, don't say you're not here to hold a candle for him. You are here to hold a candle for him. You phone me up every week to have a go at Corbyn.
I'm not having a go at Corbyn, and you're out of order there, Judge, because you know I think a lot of Jeremy Corbyn, and his policies mean a lot to me. You know that, mate.
You just hope that he gets beaten.
No, listen, let me say, I'm gutted that it's even taken place. Let me say something for you. Let's just take Jeremy Corbyn out the picture. Right, I'm in it right, and we're going into election now. Think about what we've had to put up with in the past 20 years, and this Owen Smith suddenly come up. Like, let's say, never served with Blair, got no history of voting against his party, Left-wing views are plenty, similar to Jeremy Corbyn.
That's nonsense, and you know it. That's all completely invented. He's reinvented himself. He supported the Iraq War. He said it was a gallant attempt to fix things in Iraq. He abstained on the welfare bill. He's got a long record as being part of the South Wales Labour Tafia, the right-wing Labour hegemony in the south of Wales that has presided over a collapse in Labour's position in South Wales. He's presided over the rise of UKIP in Wales, the rise of Plaid Cymru in Wales. That's what right-wing Labour has done in Wales.
George, I'm not meaning to laugh, mate, but listen, we've got a decision to make, mate, and I'm telling you, we've got to get rid of a Tory government. I'm not against Corbyn. You've got me wrong. I'm telling you, in this current climate, right, people like you and me and as left-wingers we are, we've got to accept it's not right for the country. It's not going to happen, right? And
you just told me that Owen Smith is also left-wing. So he's not. So he's not right-wing. He's not right for the country either.
Wait a minute, we've got a Labour candidate, right, who's totally into nationalisation, get all nationalisation back, a 200 billion borrowing, he's going to try and get back behind the unions. To me, that's a touch. There's things I don't like, but that's the way the world's gone, and that's politics.
Mark, you know that you're not allowed to nationalise in the European Union, don't you? He wants not only to stay in the European Union, but he's insisting on rerunning a referendum we've just had where people voted to leave the European Union.
George, I know, but you know what? I know you want it out, but I think he's got a point. I think he's got a proper point. I don't think the people went into that election knowing what they were thinking.
Mark, that's entirely legitimate, what you just said there. But don't say at one and the same time that he's all in favour of nationalisation and he's in favour of staying in the EU when nationalisation is illegal if we stay in the EU. I've stumped you, haven't I?
No, no, George, you haven't. I'm going to start laughing, and I don't mean. I'm trying not to stop laughing because you know I love you and I love your show. It's not me. There's bad and there's good, and we don't know where we stand. This Brexit has left everyone flummoxed, and just to say, well, let's leave and wait for this Article 52, and then we're off. It's not good enough. No one is holding the Tory party to account. Nobody.
You're missing my point, Mark. You're missing my point. My point is that you are seeking to face both ways. You say that Owen Smith is left-wing, and in the same breath you say that the country's not ready for a left-wing leader, but you're supporting Owen Smith. You say he's in favour of nationalisation, when in fact he's in favour of defying the result of the referendum and staying in the EU, which makes nationalisation illegal. You are facing both ways at the same time.
No, I'm not sure. No, and when I talk about the left, when I talk about Jeremy Corbyn, I'm talking about the furthest left. I don't think this country is ready for someone as far left as me, you, or Jeremy Corbyn. I just don't think they're ready for it. I believe I'm old hat. I hope we are the reawakening, and I hope when Jeremy gets in, I hope there's no buffing about down the corners. Get in and do it. This is what we're doing. We're nationalising it. We're doing this. We're out of Europe. We don't want Trident, etc., etc. I hope that happens. But I've got something in me, George, that I just can't see it happening, and I've got to make a decision what way to go.
Well, you've made your decision and you've made it clear. You've voted for the Viagra salesman, who's a fraud, who's pretending to be what he is not. OK, look, it's been nice disagreeing with you, as always, Mark, in Liverpool. Thanks very much for that. Cool Daddy points out that Diane James was pretty famous 3 years ago when she came a close second in the Eastleigh by-election at UKIP's peak. Listen, Daddy. She came second in a seat that she should have won in a canter. And if Farage had had the guts to stand, he would have won in a canter. There was only an Eastleigh by-election because the Liberal Democrat MP had been sent to prison for lying about his speeding points. That ought to have been an unholdable seat for the Liberal Democrats. UKIP were second. And to say that that made her famous by not winning a seat that she should have won, I think is stretching it a bit. Now, after the break, I'm going to speak to Chris Nineham from the Stop the War Coalition about the Foreign Affairs Select Committee decision to condemn root and branch from A to Z David Cameron's war in Libya, which has led not just to a disaster for Libya or even for the region as a whole, but for a disaster in Europe as well. Now, coming up later in the programme, we'll be talking to John Le Boutillier, the former congressman in the US, about the situation in the presidential election, about Hillary Clinton's health, which he denied was an issue when I last spoke to him, but which has dominated the campaign over the last few days. And, of course, as I've said earlier, remember, Ian Lee is on after me at 10 p.m. This is George Galloway. This is the mother of all talk shows. We need your calls. 0844 499 1000. Stay tuned. I need some capitalist messages.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, in a scathing report, said that David Cameron and Nicolas Sarkozy's war in Libya was ill-conceived. It said that it had taken no account of the character, of the nature of the fanatics that the NATO forces were then dragooned into supporting and putting into power. Since then, Libya has broken up into at least 3 countries. It has 4 prime ministers. Don't ask me how that works. 4 prime ministers, 3 governments, no army, a plethora of fanatic militias whose principal purpose seems to be to murder each other. The Stop the War Coalition, led until recently by Jeremy Corbyn, was right about Libya, as it had been right about Iraq and Afghanistan before it. In fact, here's a point I'm going to put to Chris Nineham. If Jeremy Corbyn had been the Prime Minister, imagine this. There would have been no Iraq war. There would have been no slaughter of British service personnel in Helmand province. There would have been no war against Libya, which broke the country up and put it in the hands of Al-Qaeda, ISIS and various other fanatic groups. And there are many other wars and conflicts that would have been handled dramatically differently if the former president of the Stop the War Coalition had in fact been the Prime Minister. So the Stop the War Coalition, yet again, is vindicated, this time by Parliament's own Foreign Affairs Select Committee, chaired by a Conservative, Sir Crispin Blunt. Chris Nineham, take a bow. The coalition was right again.
Well, I mean, it's true, but at the same time, it's not much consolation, because time after time, the arguments that we all put and met in the run-up to these wars, would at the year you get some sort of at least partial vindication. But I mean, hindsight is just not good enough. What we need is a dramatic change of course in foreign policy. And like you had Jeremy as Prime Minister, then you can only assume that these absolute catastrophes wouldn't have happened. And what's incredible is that it's exactly these policies of his the foreign wars, his opposition to Trident, his opposition to NATO and so forth. These are the things that he's being attacked about most vociferously by the Labour right. I mean, that's what's so mad, because these are exactly the policies, first of all, that would have made a huge difference to the outcome of the last few years. They're also incredibly popular in the country.
Yeah. Well, look, the Labour MPs that are pursuing so fanatically the overthrow of Jeremy Corbyn almost all voted for one war after another. They voted for the Iraq War. They voted for the Yugoslav War before that. They voted for the Afghan War. They voted for the Syria War. They voted for the Libya War. War after war after war they voted for. Jeremy Corbyn voted against them all. We've lost Chris Nineham, unfortunately. We're trying to get him back. But let me tell you, I was not in Parliament at the time. Only 12 MPs, just 12 MPs, voted against the Libyan war. And the foremost amongst them was the now leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. It is incredible, as Chris Nineham just said, that they keep talking with these reports about the need to learn lessons, but they never learn lessons. And the fundamental lesson they never learn is that they shouldn't be making these wars in the first place. Chris is back on the line. I was saying, Chris, only 12 British MPs voted against the Libya war that the Select Committee has just condemned as ill-conceived, root and branch, in Parliament this week.
Yeah, no, that's right. And that, of course, was after the experience of both Afghanistan and Iraq. So it is extraordinary that, we're back to ground zero every time. And it seems to me that one of the big problems that we've really got to address is that not amongst ordinary people, but in elite circles, it's become a kind of accepted notion that, that problems, if there are problems in the Middle East or in North Africa or in Central Asia, then that is the West's concern, and the West has some sort of a right to move in, to send in troops, to try and sort it out. I mean, even this report, which in general is relatively good about the experience of the Libyan operation. Even that report ends with an appeal for the West to get in behind a government that actually has been imposed by the West, the government of the GNA, which isn't really a government at all. And it actually suggests that we need to have a discussion and then have some more military intervention, which is just extraordinary. And we've got to break from this, what is essentially a kind of neo-colonial idea that, we have a right to determine how different countries around the world should govern themselves. This is a very big problem.
And picking leaders, I mean, as you say, this very report that we're talking about picks one of 3 governments and says we should all pile in behind it, which is probably the kiss of death for it.
Absolutely. And this is a government, by the way, and a president, al-Sarraj, who's actually, wasn't even living in Libya 10 months ago, who was actually brought to Libya by, actually in a Qatari battleship staffed by NATO sailors and soldiers. So this is someone who's been physically imposed by the West on the country. I mean, it's absolutely, and the government is called, with no hint of satire, the government of national accord. Well, it's no such thing. It's a fragmented country. And this is the West's man, and partly what this is all about. I mean, it's sordid and it's cynical, but what it's about is it's who's going to control the oil in Libya and the gas in Libya, because Libya is the biggest producer of gas on the African continent, and it's the biggest source of oil anywhere near Europe. Or the nearest source of oil to European countries. So that's largely what this is about. It's another scramble for Africa.
And he doesn't control the oil and the gas. We're actually backing the guy who doesn't control the oil and the gas, hoping that our backing will get his hands on it. I mean, talk about irony. Are we led by fools or knaves, Chris? This was a question I used to frequently ask, sharing platforms with you. Are these people making all these blunders because they're idiots, or is there something that we're just not getting?
Well, I mean, I think, unfortunately, you have to say that it's more knavery than foolishness, really. And the reason I say that is because I think that, in order to understand the complete madness of these policies, you have to start to think, what are the real motivations? And time after time, we're presented with humanitarian arguments for these interventions. Get rid of Assad, control ISIS, get rid of Gaddafi in Libya previously, defend the people of Benghazi. But time after time, what you find is that under the surface, really what is being pursued is a kind of geopolitical strategy that, this is about. Essentially, they're about resources. They're resource wars. And I think that was an argument that we collectively won back in the day over Iraq, because I think the majority of people in Britain, and in fact you can see it in the polls, think that was a war for oil. And they're absolutely right. They would talk about Saddam Hussein, they'd talk about weapons of mass destruction. That was all so much hot air designed to create the atmosphere in which they were able to launch the invasion. And the same is true time after time. This isn't about protecting the people of Libya. This isn't about establishing a coherent government. This isn't about even getting rid of ISIS, horrible though they are. This is a land grab. This is about competition for a country that is very rich in resources if it is poor in social and economic terms.
Chris Nynham, Vice Chairman of the Stop the War Coalition, thanks very much for joining us, kicking off this discussion about Libya and about David Cameron, who has done a runner after being named and shamed in the Select Committee's report. Cameron is gone.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite!
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Let's go straight to the phone lines. Tina is in West London. Go ahead, Tina.
Hi, George. How are you? And congratulations on your film premiere in Kilkenny.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's all going well. The film's number one on iTunes and Amazon now. Other platforms are available.
Yeah, I've been telling everyone to go and buy it. The best film, they'll see it all year.
Excellent. Go ahead. What would you like to say, Tina?
Yeah, I run a support page, as you know, for Jeremy Corbyn and true socialists everywhere, like yourself. And I've been inundated with emails with people that have been purged with no proper reason, and they're outraged. They're not going to take this lying down. They're going to complain. But as you're well aware, they're trying to destroy Jeremy, the most dangerous person in the country. The only people Jeremy is dangerous to is this disgusting, vile government we have and all the corporations that they support. So we have to keep fighting. You've been fighting for years, George, and we're going to carry on the fight as well.
We are. And have you any idea, because I don't think Corbyn does, how many people have been purged? They've acknowledged that it's thousands.
Well, I run a page. I've got 8,500 members, and I'm still getting emails now because I've asked them all to contact me and let me know how many of them have been purged.
And how do we get to your page? What's the address of it?
It's a Facebook support page, and it's Jeremy Corbyn, True Socialism, and it's got 8,500 members, and we're gaining 1,000 members every month.
Well, you'll gain a few more now after that plug. Tina, when this is over, is it going to be over? I mean, next Saturday, does amity break out? Do all these vile attacks on Corbyn cease? Or are we immediately plunged into the next round?
I haven't a clue, George. You're an old hand at this. I haven't got a clue, but all I know is the more and more they attack Corbyn, the more we are going to redouble our efforts to support the man, because we've got no other option.
And the better he does, by the way. I mean, his performance at Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday was by universal acclaim, his best yet. His performance in his own Question Time debate against Owen Smith was his best one to date. It looks like he's thriving on the pressure.
This man, it doesn't feel the pressure. As he said on the Mars show on Sunday, being under pressure is someone that can't treat their children, someone who can't clothe their children, someone who's in desperate straits like many of the people are in this country. So Jeremy is thriving on this, and the truth will out, as you know, George, with your excellent performance against the Senate. The truth will always out, and Jeremy is a man of conviction, he's a man of truth, and he's a man of justice, and we won't give up, and I'm sure Jeremy won't give up.
Amen. Thanks for that, Tina. Lovely call. Let's go to Phil in Wimbledon. Go ahead, Phil.
How you doing, George? You all right?
I'm good, thanks. What would you like to say?
I'd just like to comment on the situation at the Labour Party at the moment, and question time as well. I mean, I felt a bit embarrassed and naive that I thought the tide was turning with regards to the press after Corbyn's excellent performance on grammar schools in the House of Commons.
It was a false dawn, wasn't it? It didn't last more than a few hours.
Yeah, well, it's weird because there was complimentary articles across all the papers, and what should have been the alarm bells is even the members of the PLP were complimented on Twitter.
Yeah.
However, what's become clear to me now is that it's not that they're not attacking Corbyn anymore. They've just run out of ammo for Corbyn. He's kind of indestructible in that way. So what they're doing is they're switching the tactics to what they see as an easier target in John McDonnell and Momentum. So I was actually quite impressed with his restraint, given he can be quite a fiery character sometimes. I think he came off pretty well, but it was just quite disgusting how obviously coordinated that panel was.
Yeah.
And if you needed proof of how coordinated it was, all you need to do is watch the footage of Anna Sowerberry referring to her notes that Bimbleby must have wrote. On a side note, for that woman, she's been on record as making some very, very unparliamentary language to Ed Miliband. I can't repeat it because I might get purged.
She likes a wee drink, does Anna Sowerberry.
Oh, I'm not surprised. And also, she's only last year she was claiming £14 expenses for delivering poppies for Remembrance Day. So that tells you about...
That's the character of this person that was slandering MacDonald. Somebody who claimed £14 for poppies on Remembrance Day. Just remember. Let's everybody remember that, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to thank Alistair Campbell as well, because he's put a flame under me, and no doubt many others. I'm now going to join Momentum.
Well, good.
Purely on the basis of that, if he says it's bad, then it must be good.
He put a lot of flames under a lot of people, Phil, and most of them were incinerated in them. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Scott in Glasgow. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi, George. Nice to speak to you again.
Okay, sir. Go ahead.
It was just the right of the Labour Party. That's what upsets me more than anything else, is how gullible do they think that the public really are. I mean, it's not everybody, and it's no disrespect to anybody else, but it's not everybody in this country that sits and watches Strictly Come Dancing and the X Factor. Some people actually take an interest, and the right of the party, for me, it's more dirty tricks than anything else. I mean, what are people that do take an interest meant to think when you see a coup starting from the kick-off? Then all of a sudden the membership goes from £3 to £25. Why? Do they not think people would say, well, why are they doing that? And then the purge. I don't get it, George. It's like two sides of the party. I mean, one side of the party for me is honest and straight down the line now. As far as I can see now, with Jeremy Corbyn, he's straight down the line. I mean, this guy's been doing this for 30, 40, he's been doing this for 30, 40 years, gone on marches for apartheid, CND, always been there, and all of a sudden the Bulging turns up. And do you know, one of the most repetitive things that he says when he's debating against Jeremy Corbyn is, I agree with what he says. I agree with what Jeremy says.
Yeah,
but what Jeremy says, why are you standing against him?
Well, that's the standout point. But the other point is your record proves the complete opposite. You actually opposed all the things that Corbyn supported and supported all the things that Corbyn opposed. And the record on that is clear. Scott, thanks for the call. A very nice one. Rhys is in South Wales. Go ahead, Rhys.
Hiya, George. Thanks for taking the call. I've been quiet for a while, but I've been listening. Good show.
I hope I haven't offended the South Wales Labour Tafia.
No, I don't.
Or actually, I hope I have.
No, not that you've inspired a lot of real Labours, but the South Wales Tafia, they're just a collection of flunkies. You'll know that anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
But what I wanted to say I talk to as many people as I can about politics, and that's probably why I don't have many friends. But what I do notice is that some of them are concerned about Jeremy's foreign policies, which I think are fantastic. And what I always consider it back to is people like Churchill, is that somebody who would lead a country and under enormous pressure and to carry the voice of the electorate in times that are struggling. And what I said to one of you guys in the back there was, if you were in the middle of the desert and you said Smith out to get you a pail of water, and he said Jeremy out,
very good.
Jeremy would take his teeth out and dig the hole, and he'd come back with the water. He's that type of guy. He would do his utmost, absolute best to do it, and I think that's very admirable of what he is as well. And the last night, what they done to John McDonnell was disgusting. I think John McDonnell is an excellent politician as well. I think his delivery, the way he's calm, collective, fantastic.
Well, both of them are very calm, and Jeremy in particular. I've known him for almost 40 years. He's as calm a person as I've ever encountered in politics. He's got an almost Zen-like calm. He's serene. He's not fazed. He's not easily upset. He's not bullyable. He's courageous. And he's right. I mean, the foreign policies to which you refer, if we go through them, he's been proved right on every one. And his enemies have been proved wrong on every one. Now, that's what you call leadership, Rhys.
Yeah, exactly. The qualities that you said, being calm, methodical, all of those things. If this country was in trouble at any point, and God forbid, I hope that would never happen, that is the type of leader that you would want, without any shadow of a doubt. He would give his own life for everybody else here. He seems that type of guy.
He is. He absolutely is. Rhys, excellent call. Thanks for that from Carmarthenshire in South Wales. Alfred Green makes an interesting point in relation to the NHS. Where is the mass demonstration on the crisis in the NHS? I don't think there's a full awareness of what's happening in the service. And Panopticon says that's a very attractive picture of a man with a cheroot, even though I've now stopped more than 1 year. If we don't do something soon, it'll be gone. Talking about the NHS, and many millions will suffer. It's worth fighting for. The Duke says they'll continue to swell the number of Tories as they steadily migrate to the corporate party. He's talking about the plans of the Labour right after this election. Well, in one way, that would be preferable, Dukey, but it's much more pernicious, the suspicion I have, that they intend to stay in, some of them at least, and continue to cause all the problems that they've been causing. Despite which, Corbyn keeps on winning. Labour had a 10-point rise in its majority in the mayoral election in the London Borough of Hackney this week. 10 points up. And the Greens beat the Tories into third place. Corbyn keeps on winning elections. And this notion that he's unelectable is, first of all, ridiculous by comparison with Owen Smith, who is much less electable because he has no mass support base in the country. He couldn't inspire anyone. You'd need to take a Viagra to stand up for Owen Smith. You wouldn't be able to do it on your own, and therefore he starts off miles behind. So it's flying in the face of all the evidence. Corbyn has won every election that's been put in front of him. Robert Johnson says May is destroying any chance she has to be a successful Prime Minister. I think that Theresa May is in trouble, actually. And I mentioned it, I alluded to it earlier with our gentleman from the former chairman of the NHS Trust, that she's making it all about her. and she's embracing, indeed becoming the poster woman for two of the least popular policies that any Tory government has ever advanced, namely a return to the 1950s in grammar schools, which has no support, appreciable support, anywhere at all. And the second is her bankrolling blank cheque for Jeremy Hunt, the catastrophic Health Secretary. These are very serious political errors that she's making. And, as was alluded by my guest earlier, the Brexit issue ain't over yet. Cressy, 72, says, what did you think of last night's Question Time's disgraceful behaviour from Campbell and MacDonald? Well, Cressy, MacDonald was the victim of what happened there.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Talk Radio.
It's George Galloway. It's the mother of all talk shows, and we're coming up to the final hour. So get this number down, 0844 499 1000. We're talking about Trump and Hillary.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Well, we've talked about a lot tonight, and we've still got 1 hour to go. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. He started as a joke. Then he was the Republican candidate miles behind, looking down the barrel of a landslide defeat in the presidential election. Now, he's beginning to catch up nationally and move ahead in swing states. President Trump is no longer a laughing matter.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, tiny hands, tiny dainty hands he may have, but those hands appear to be reaching more widely than is good for your health. John Le Boutillier and I have made a tentative agreement that we're going to move together into a condominium on the tip of the South Island of New Zealand, as probably being the last safe place on the earth if Donald Trump becomes the president. Having said that, if Hillary Clinton becomes the president, that condominium might still be very well worth investing in. I said to John a couple of weeks ago, last time I talked to him, that I had some doubts about Hillary Clinton's health. John disagreed. He said it was a product of the feverish imaginations of alt-right, the far-right in the United States, the survivalists, the racists, the Klansmen, and all of these people are, of course, present in this debate. But all of us saw, and more importantly, everyone in the United States saw, Hillary Clinton collapse as she was led to her car at the 9/11 commemoration ceremony in New York City. And it turned out that, hey, what a surprise, the Clinton team had been lying all along about her health condition. It turned out that she already knew that she had been diagnosed with pneumonia, which at her age is no mean ailment to be suffering from when you're in the full glare of the United States presidential election. And this question mark over her fitness for office, literal fitness for office, added to the very widespread suspicion in the United States that she is unfit for office in a different sense has given a new spring in the step of the Donald Trump campaign. He's close to within 2 points. That's well within the margin of error in the national polls. But as you know, and as John has painstakingly explained to you many times, it's not a first-past-the-post election. It's not the person that gets most votes that becomes the president. It's the person who gets a majority in the Electoral College. And there are very big states that are called swing states that have huge numbers of Electoral College votes. And in 2 of those, Ohio, the Rust Belt, and in sunny Florida, Trump has moved as much as 5 points ahead. So there's a very real possibility that Donald Trump, imagine, will be the president of the most powerful and richest country in the world come November. Now that doesn't get the hairs on the back of your neck standing up for one way or one reason or another. I don't know what's wrong with you. From my point of view, as I've said many times, I'm supporting Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. I reject the idea of lesser evilism in politics because that's just a recipe for politics getting more and more evil. So when we connect with John Le Boutillier, which we haven't yet, we'll explore that issue further. Let me deal with some of the tweets that are really filling my screen here. I can't keep up with them. Sarah says, I don't understand why people think it's hard left to want housing for all, a properly funded NHS, education, etc. Sarah, you're right. It isn't hard left. It's the ABC of Labour politics. And that's all Corbyn is. Real Labour. And it's because we haven't had real Labour since the unfortunate, untimely demise of the late and great John Smith that we find it such a shock to the system to have a real Labour leader. James McQueen, however, thinks both Corbyn and Smith are a joke, but then he has an avatar of a hen on his Twitter feed. Robert Johnson says Owen Smith is a clown who belongs in the circus. Corbyn will win. He wouldn't prosper in the circus. There's nothing funny about him. Owen is more like a Tory who sells ice cream for a living. I don't think he's like a Tory, but his unfortunate encounter with an ice cream van when his crowd was so small that he was able, from the small change in his pocket, to buy every one of them an ice cream is an image that will live forever. Polly says the Tories will sell anything. That's absolutely true. They know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Hassan says Owen Smith's a frontman for the new discredited warmongering Labour. They are desperately trying to unseat JC. And of course with the full collaboration, and I use that word advisedly, the full collaboration of the mainstream media and in particular the state broadcaster funded on pain of imprisonment by the taxpayer. George, I'm not sure who's madder, Mark from Liverpool or Donald from the USA. Come on, Jeremy, says Ray from London. And Diane Johnson says the warmongers, especially the Labour warmongers, should hang their heads in shame. Michael Dean says, I knew it. I caught the very end of BBC Question Time, and I'm still pushing for neoliberalism. Now, have we got the sage, John Le Boutillier, on the line? I believe we do. John, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, George. We have me via Skype. We had a little panic with your wonderful producer. Got me through it. I'm here, ready to talk.
Excellent. Now, I had a bit of Schadenfreude just a moment or two before you joined us, when I recalled that I was the person first, I think, in British radio to raise issues of Hillary Clinton's health. When we last talked, you Correct. Said you were not concerned about it. Are you concerned now?
Well, yeah, I mean, she's had, since we talked, you were correct, you raised it, I poo-pooed it, because and I'm not lumping you in, because you're on the liberal side of the spectrum. On the right in America, they've been harping on this thing for years, that she's got Parkinson's disease, brain tumors, walks around with a nurse and an EpiPen and all this stuff. But this past Sunday, you know, everyone's seen it. She collapsed from pneumonia at the 911 ceremony. She went off the trail Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, back yesterday. Looks fine. I've seen 3 speeches on TV since then. I think she's in better health now. She looks well. She climbed up the steps to the airplane yesterday and today. They showed that on TV. I think it's not an issue at the moment, George, but if she has another incident, another collapse, any sort of serious health thing, that will be the end of her campaign. It will cause her to lose. That's how dire this can be.
Yeah, on that I agree in every particular. And if that were to happen, what do the Democrats do, John? Does Bernie Sanders inherit the ticket because he was the runner-up? Or do the DNC, the ruling executive, have the power to hand the ticket to either her VP or to Joe Biden, the current VP?
Well, it's a very complicated problem because of the timing of where we are. We're in the middle of September, obviously. 8 weeks left. Let's just say something happened to Hillary and she agreed to drop out. Let's just say that hypothetically.
Yeah.
The Democratic National Committee, which is, I think, 156 people, would meet to pick a new nominee. And they might pick any of the 3 you mentioned, Biden, Kaine, maybe even Bernie Sanders. I doubt it because he's not a member of the Democratic Party. But it doesn't matter who they pick. They pick somebody. The problem is the ballots in the 50 states are being printed now. And in another couple of weeks when this would happen, all the states have locked in the ballot. So Hillary would be on the ballot. But if she dropped out, the electors could say a vote for Hillary on the ballot is actually a vote for Biden, the nominee. They could do that, but it would be very complicated. It would help Trump. It would help Trump very much. And that's all predicated on Hillary agreeing to drop out, which I wouldn't bet on. These people are tough, as you know, and they've put their life into it, and they're not giving up easily.
No, she'd be like El Cid, tied to her horse and sent into battle.
Dead. Right, dead.
Yes. We better not laugh. Now, this is of some moment for you and me, John, because we're headed for a condominium in the tip of the South Island of New Zealand if Trump wins. If this circumstance that we're discussing, we'll come on to another one in a minute, if this circumstance occurs with a state of total confusion over who the Democrat is and people having to write in names on the ballot paper and so on, that more or less guarantees a Trump victory, doesn't it?
Probably, yeah. I think it probably does. Things have been floated around in the news that some electors, and the way our system works is every state has a number of electoral votes. Well, I live in New York State. I think we have 33 electoral votes. That means there are 33 human beings representing Trump, 33 human beings representing Hillary. If she wins the state of New York, her 33 electors go on December 12th or whatever it is to the meeting of the Electoral College. And normally they automatically vote for the person they're pledged to. But recently, several Republican electors in the various states have publicly said they might not vote for Trump, even if Trump wins their state.
Wow.
So that is something that we've not really encountered before.
They'd be breaking out the guns if that were to happen, John.
That's right. Well, it could happen. By the way, we have another event that happened today that is going to have an effect on this campaign. Huge effect, which is, for some inexplicable reason today, Trump decided to announce that he now believes Obama was born in the United States. And he refused to take any questions. The media has gone ballistic since 11:30 this morning when he announced it. It's now 4, so it's 4.5 hours ago. And they're just going crazy over the thing. And it's the huge story. No one knows why did he decide to do it now. What does this do for the people who believe that Obama was born out of the country, which is, by the way, a majority of Republicans? And it opens up a can of worms of other things Trump has reversed himself on that they're going to start asking him. So watch this over this weekend.
He has begun to calm down a bit, to sound at least vaguely presidential material, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Since he hired the new staff, Kellyanne Conway, who's a woman pollster, very, very competent, George. She could work for you and give you a good, operating campaign. She knows what's going on. And she's did the polling and saw where Trump was weak. And I can tell you where he's weak. He's weak among moderate Republicans, suburban voters. These are white voters who are not racist, who don't like racism, don't want a Republican racist candidate. She decided to reverse his image quickly by taking him to Mexico City, having him apologize, going to Detroit to talk to blacks in a church, going to Flint, Michigan this week to blacks in a church, and then now today to undo the damage of the birther controversy. Question is it too late to reverse this damage? Is it believable that this guy would say all this nonsense for a year and a half, in the birther case 5 years, and suddenly announce that he's no longer thinking that way? That's what we're going to find out.
Now, the polls are closing. The national polls are closing, and the swing state polls are beginning to read quite well for Trump.
Correct. Today, if you had to put a gun to my head, I would say in the national polling, it's a draw, dead even. The electoral map, that's the states that normally vote Democrat versus the ones that normally vote Republican, still slightly favor Hillary. But if any candidate could blow a race that she should win, it's obviously Hillary Clinton, who should be ahead of this clown by 10 points. But, of course, Trump is such a clown, a regular Republican would be ahead of Hillary by 10 points. Instead, they've drawn each other as their opponent. The two worst, most negative and damaged presidential nominees in American history, running against each other in the same campaign.
Couldn't make it up. Now, the parallel elections for the Senate and the Congress, how are they shaping up?
Lately, it's leaning towards the Republicans. As Trump has come up a little bit and Hillary's gone down, and as Republican Senate candidates have figured out in their own states how to run separate from Trump and stay away from him, and they never campaign with Trump, George, they never let him up on the stage with them, they don't appear with them, they're never pictured with them. As long as they do that, most of them are doing okay. We're going to lose at least 3 Senate seats. I would think Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, probably. But we have a margin of 4. So right now, the Republicans are feeling a little bit better about the Senate. But there's still 2 months to go. And, of course, the big debate a week from Monday could rejigger the race all over again one way or the other. And who knows what's going to happen.
Now, she'll be methodical and well prepped for the debate. Will he, or is there a danger of him going off-piste?
Well, there's a danger of him acting in a general election debate the way he acted in the Republican primary debates, which are a different audience, obviously.
Yeah.
It's the base of the GOP. And he was doing some crazy stuff, talking about the size of his manhood.
Yeah.
And all that. He can't afford any of that. If he does any of that, he'll lose the debate. I think he's smart enough to know that he can't do it. So I think he'll probably do pretty well in the debate. And let me just say one thing about Hillary as an observer of her. She's a pretty poor candidate, but she's a hard worker, a plotter, a determined candidate who is at her best, George, when her back is against the wall. When she's got to fight, she's a much better candidate. Now, we saw that in 2008. She should have beaten Obama. She blew it, and then she got back in the race halfway through and was a damn good candidate for her. She's never going to be her husband, never going to be an Obama or a Reagan or something, but she maxed out. And I think now her back is against the wall. I've watched her yesterday and today on TV, and she's looking determined to win this thing.
John, it's absolutely fascinating, gripping, and your wonderful honeyed voice explaining it all so brilliantly
Thank you, George.
Makes it for me. Thanks very much indeed.
We're going to do a great show together for 4 years from New Zealand.
We're
going to make our living broadcasting to the world. From
exactly.
Excellent.
We are checking the telecoms as we speak. John Le Boutillier, thanks very much. We'll talk again soon, I hope. John Le Boutillier, former member of Congress and a friend of the show, talking about the U.S. presidential race and the state of American politics.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, you'll remember, I hope, in one of the earliest shows, one of our legendary callers, Damien in Brighton, told us about the shenanigans involved in the Brighton and Hove constituency Labour Party, the biggest, I think, in the country, with thousands of members, 4,000 or 5,000 members, was suspended on the allegation that there had been bullying and intimidation going on. Damien systematically took us through how those allegations were false. And lo and behold, CCTV footage emerged this very week, which proved that Damien was telling the truth, and the Labour Party that suspended the constituency were lying through their teeth. That's why I'm glad to see, up on the screen now, the legend that is Damien in Brighton. Go ahead, Damien.
Good evening, George.
I hope I haven't preempted you. Were you going to make that point?
No, I wasn't, but I would advise Peter Carl to update his CV.
Yeah,
because he's going to need it.
It turns out to be a complete piece of mendacious fiction.
Yeah, we're seeing very similar tactics from the NEC that we witnessed from the Democratic, the DNC. Very similar, a bit too similar for comfort, to be honest, George. But that wasn't the reason I phoned, George. I wanted to talk this evening about neoliberalism.
Yep.
Now, the reason I wanted to do that is because people talk about Jeremy Corbyn not being a leader, but as far as I can see, he's already identified and chosen the topic of neoliberalism as the battleground for the next general election.
Yeah.
And I think it also follows on from that is the reason that Jeremy Corbyn and his shadow chancellor are under constant attack from the Conservative Party, the right wing of the Labour Party, and the majority of the media. So I think people might have heard the term and they might wonder what it actually means. So this would be a good opportunity to examine and define the term. And I think a good way of doing that would be by examining neoliberalism's key objectives and the key concepts underpinning the ideology. So if we start with the key objective of neoliberalism, it can be summed up in a sentence, and that is to roll back the state.
Yep.
Now, the ultimate objective, and this is all neoliberals proponents of the ideology will proudly declare this, but their ultimate objective regarding the state is to create what's called a night watchman state. So that's a state that's got two functions. The first function is to fund a police force which has one duty, and that's to protect private property. And the second function of the state is to fund an armed force, and that's it. So it's very extreme philosophy, but the PFI and the privatisation of the National Health Service are all steps towards that. So that's where it wants to go. So that's the objective. Now let's turn to the key concepts. So it has three key concepts, and they are privatisation, deregulation and austerity. So let's look at the outcomes of those concepts, which incidentally were used in Africa during the 70s and 80s. And even the IMF have admitted that they set back the economies of those countries by decades. So let's look at these one by one. Now, I'll go and run through these very quickly, George, and get to my conclusion. So let's look at privatisation. So the railways are a prime case study of privatisation. 25 years after the privatisation of the railways, the taxpayer is still paying billions of pounds every year to private railway operators who are providing overcrowded, overpriced, unreliable and increasingly unsafe services. Let's look at deregulation. Deregulation led to the 2008 economic crisis, and according to the National Audit Office, that's cost the taxpayer £850 billion. And finally, let's look at austerity and see how effective that neoliberal policy is. Well, George Osborne implemented austerity on this country for the last 6 years. He borrowed 3 times as much money in 6 years. Sorry, 3 times more money in 6 years than Gordon Brown borrowed in 13 years.
He tripled the national debt. So we got the austerity, and our debt became infinitely worse.
The national debt is currently standing, thanks to the Conservative Party's economic incompetence, at £1.56 trillion. And the other side effect of neoliberalism is that over the last 40 years, productivity in the workplace, so all those hard-working people going out to work every morning, they've doubled productivity. And wages, medium wages, in real terms, have remained stagnant.
Well, look, I need to break there, Damien, but you've done a wonderful job in explaining what it is that Corbyn seeks to overthrow. And when you boil all these concepts down to the practical, everyday lives of people, that's a very, very popular set of policies that Jeremy Corbyn has got.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, we've toured the horizon, and a part of that horizon, a very ugly, gaping gap, is the collapse of the state formerly known as Libya. Harry's on the phone, wants to talk about it. Go ahead, Harry.
Hi, George. Thanks very much for having me on. Big fan of the show.
Thanks.
I just want to know, with the UK government, what is wrong with the world and UK governments? And people are living like they've not got any mothers. I think the whole world is addicted to drama, and they're only attracted to things that bring the drama. So overseas, we're trying to stop terrorism, but what they're forgetting is that we've still got terrorism here living in the UK, in the USA. I mean, the CIA, they have the Bloods, the Crips and the KKK. But I want to know, if you only have love for your own race, then you only leave space to sort of discriminate. And to discriminate only generates hate. And when you hate, well, you're bound to get irate. And I want to know, where is the love? Because there's people killing, there's people dying, children hurt in here and crying. They're only attracted to what you keep.
Well, very poetic, Harry. I don't know if that was scripted or spontaneous, but clever nonetheless. And I knew it was coming. I knew from the tone of your voice that this was no ordinary call. You did, however, make one point I'd like to pick up on. The drama. The media played an enormous role in inciting the public in support of David Cameron's war. There were television stations in pickup trucks racing up and down the highway with all these armed men, all chanting their fanatic extremist slogans that the correspondents driving alongside them must have known the meaning of these slogans, and yet they portrayed this as a noble and democratic revolution, when any fool knoweth that the people on those pickup trucks with those weapons seeking to overthrow Gaddafi, the last thing in the world these people were Democrats. They were fanatics, religious fanatics of one kind or another, one branch or another of religious extremism, and we put them into power. Our airmen were used as their Air Force. Never forget that. Now let's talk to Julian from Reading. Go ahead, Julian.
Hello, George.
Nice to talk to you. Go ahead.
How you doing? Bush, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Clinton again, and then probably Jeb Bush again.
Yeah, they say it's a republic. It doesn't sound much like it, does it?
It doesn't make sense.
Chelsea Clinton seems to be limbering up for a political future, too.
Well, so it'd be Jeb Bush and then Chelsea Clinton, and then, I don't know, whatever next Bush is on the way.
Yeah, it is.
Junior.
And, if they were paragons of political brilliance, then one could at least forgive it. But to end up with the two most hated politicians in America running against each other for president, asking people to choose one cheek of the same backside or the other, when both of them are backsides. It is a remarkable thing, isn't it?
Is that the only person they could get to stop Hillary Clinton is Donald Trump? Couldn't Michael Moore have put himself forward, or Robert De Niro, or anybody?
Yeah.
Anyone.
Well, John Le Boutillier just told us any Republican other than Trump would be 10 points ahead of Hillary Clinton. And any Democrat other than Hillary Clinton would be 10 points ahead of Donald Trump. And yet it's Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton.
George, I know you don't like to wear a tinfoil hat, but does that make you wonder, has Donald Trump been put there? He's a friend of the Clintons. Is he doing her the biggest favour? Whether he knows it or not, he is.
I don't think so, because I think he's going to beat her. But that's just my suspicion, Julian. Yeah, it's my suspicion. Anyway, thanks for your call. I'm going to push on because there's a lot of people trying to get on the show. Thanks for the call. Josh is in London on the Labour story. Go ahead, Josh.
Hey, George, you right? Yeah, I'm Jewish, which doesn't play a huge part in my life, but sort of being on Twitter this summer, I think I've seen a lot of kind of Smith side of really, I guess you'd call it trolling or politicising the issue, or if you sort of talk back against, I don't know, sort of what's going on, there's a bit of nastiness. And then, yeah, I'm not thrilled with John McDonnell either. So, I don't know, I guess I'm just a bit cynical about the whole thing.
Well, tell me what you think is wrong with McDonnell.
I don't know. To be honest, I think the Owen Smith camp's got some more dirty tricks than McDonnell. I think, with Question Time last night, he sort of had an opportunity to talk about how much of a mess the Conservatives created with, no Brexit planning or things. There's been a lot of burying of news at bad times or economic dirty tricks, and it was just a bit Labour infighting at its worst.
Well, that's right. I mean, this whole thing has been a gigantic distraction, of course.
I don't know. I don't know if you've seen that Vice documentary on Corbyn, where
no.
you basically get the impression, like you'd expect, that it was a bit ramshackle for the first year.
Yeah.
But also look at the state Miliband left Labour in. And I don't know. I think Corbyn seems to have strengthened over the summer, and I did like him before. And then with McDonnell, you do hear a few stories of sort of rubbing people up the wrong way or talking over people in meetings, or just a lot of pettiness.
Well, do you think it's going to end next Saturday, Josh? Or is it going to be more of the same after that?
Well, I mean, if you look at it in the context of there is a real sort of climate of fear, intimidation that sort of goes back a bit further, that isn't really political. I mean, I don't know. I do think, like the Joe Cox murder, I can sort of understand why there was kind of an irrational reaction to that, or there were people being very fearful, and I don't think there were any easy answers. Like, I wasn't happy with how Corbyn was treated, but I think to see it as a coup, it's like if you look at Alistair Campbell, he didn't back Owen Smith, and people see that as duplicitous or part of a conspiracy, but also, I don't know. I can't answer you that.
I'm absolutely sure he's backing Owen Smith and the public relations company with which he's most closely associated.
The only time I've seen him talk against Corbyn was about the Virgin Trains thing, where it was all a bit cack-handed. So,
well, you obviously don't follow him on Twitter. Josh, look, I need to press on. I'm grateful for your call. Thanks very much. Don't be a stranger. Call me any time. I think I can take another couple of calls, maybe, 0844 499 1000, but I need to take a break now and then go through some of these tweets.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio! Galloway, celebrate!
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
I must say, I do listen to Delaney's show at 4 o'clock. He's an excellent broadcaster, actually, and I really like Paul Ross's full set breakfast in the morning. And Ian Lee, who's up after me, is also a terrific broadcaster, so stay tuned when I leave this seat in about 15 minutes. Andy Hearn sends the following. I voted for the Labour leader, and then I was suspended for supporting other parties before I joined Labour. Now, you see, that just cannot hold water. The whole point of politics is winning people over who were supporting other parties before you won them over. It's really, really simple. Tackles52 says once Corbyn wins the leadership contest, it's time for others to either leave or support the leader. Of course, there's a third option of not leaving and not supporting the leader, which is what I suspect some of them clearly intend to do. John's on the line in London. Last caller, I think. John, go ahead.
Hello, that you, George? Yes, hi.
Welcome, you're on the air, sir.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I've written to Mr. MacDonald today in support of the dignity he displayed during the perpetual onslaught and verbal abuse and character assassination and everything that other people have said.
It was bullying.
He was bullied.
I mean, they're the ones that keep talking about bullying. It was a graphic example of live television bullying.
Yes, but that Anna Soubry's behaviour was reminiscent of a participant on the Jeremy Kyle show.
Yeah.
And that was disgraceful. She disgraced herself, she disgraced her party by her uncontrolled outburst, and with not a hint of apology, but the whole structure of the programme was contrived and orchestrated to ridicule John.
Well, I must tell you that, and I like him as a person, but that's what Dimbleby does. He does it every time I'm on it. I'm the only panellist about whom he says anything negative when he's introducing me. There is always an effort being made to find a nasty question aimed at me. He allows other panellists to attack me in a way that he would not allow others. And I think it's time for him to go. Well, I'm sorry, it's with a heavy heart to say that. No, it's time for him to go.
I've watched him in the Question Times, I've watched him on the hustings, and they always have time to find the awkward question. They're running out of time, but they've always got time to find the awkward one against somebody like... I mean, I watched them attack you in the past, but on a positive note, I've joined Momentum today, and it's because of Campbell's mouth.
He's been quite a recruiting sergeant for Momentum.
I thank him. I mean, you know, it's not everybody can pay, but I'm paying every month now, and I've not come on just to boast about that. I've just come on to say the recruiting sergeant has worked. And I don't know that your staff told you, I've actually given a false name tonight, so I don't get purged from the Labour Party.
Well, I just noticed that on my screen, and hasn't it really come to something, John, where you're calling a national radio station, a mainstream national radio station, and you're having to do so under an assumed name for fear of being purged, even though you've already cast your vote?
I've casted it, but get that one question. I mean, maybe you don't know. If they knew who I was, could they then purge me? Because the vote's gone in.
Well, they're still purging people after their votes have gone in.
So, hence the false name.
They're recruiting now what they call compliance officers, but when you look at the job description, it might be a recruitment ad for the Stasi in the German Democratic Republic, as was. They're recruiting with your money compliance officers whose job is to investigate Labour Party members.
Disgraceful.
It's in the. I saw it on Twitter. It's in the magazines today. This advert.
Thanks to you, I watch other. I get news from other things now, like the Canary and other news offerings that are out there on the internet. So I read.
Well, we better cut this short, John, just in case they've got some technology that's now recording your voice, and by voice recognition technology, they somehow identify you and post facto purge your vote for the Labour leadership. And I wish I was making that up, but unfortunately I'm not. Christina says the attack on Corbyn failed, so now the coup are trying to attack Corbyn's supporters, hence McDonnell and Momentum targeted. And when you see the panorama on Monday, the BBC's last hurrah in this year's Corbyn assassination attempt, I'm pretty sure you'll find it deeply repugnant, not least because you have paid for it. Paid through the nose for it. The presenters of it and the makers of it are paid gigantic six-figure salaries by you, and if you don't pay them, they'll send you to prison. Now, if that's not a monstrosity of a situation, I really don't know what is. Ricardo Picasso says the problem with US politics is that the country already is a democratic republic. The parties need a revolution. And Nick Mehta says Corbyn's not unelectable, but nor was Foot against Thatcher. The electorate will follow history. And Simon Brain Anders says, I don't know of another MP that can draw crowds like Justin Bieber. Corbyn has the X factor. That's absolutely true. Mick Palin says, Jesus wept. Corbyn, or Labour for that matter, will never be elected again. And that makes me sad. You're quite wrong about that. Maynard Cole says Trump is just an American version of Cameron. I'm not sure that Trump is comparable to anybody in British politics, actually. I'm not sure that there's ever been anybody like Trump. And on one level, he's running out the same trap as Sanders, as Corbyn, as other leaders of, if you like, third forces, anti-establishment, anti-1%, even though in Trump's case he likes to pretend that he is a part of the 1%. That trap is filled with people who are appealing to the working class of all ethnicities and saying to them that this system isn't working for you. And that has traction because it's true. Because this system isn't working for the majority of people. And so there's votes to be gained, there's political power to be gained by running against the political class, by capitalizing on people's hatred of the political leaders. And that hatred has been richly earned. It's been richly earned by lies and corruption and war over these last couple of decades. And so someone who can touch that zeitgeist, who can channel that zeitgeist, is in with a real shout, and that's essentially what Trump is doing. Now, Japanese writing, I think I can't read it, this avatar, says, meanwhile, the families who saw the Chilcot report remain disgusted. They do not practice freedom and liberty. The Chilcot report, what's that? Whatever happened to that? Simon says, if it's a dead heat, why has Hillary's latest book totally flopped this week? I don't think many people trust this woman. That's a fact. Simon goes on, if Hillary can draw level with Trump at the moment, it's not a dead heat. It's because she's a right cheat. And an SMS, finally, from a phone number, says, vis-a-vis the Libyan debacle, I remember you in scintillating form on Young Person's Question Time, just before the Western military intervention. Everything you said then was proven right. They tried to ambush you then and miserably failed. The young people in the audience didn't fall for the establishment bluster. Now, I had forgotten about that. Somebody please dig that out and put it back up on Twitter. I was on with a DJ from Radio 5. I forget his name. He was a sort of slightly hip, very supercilious, extremely arrogant DJ. He was chairing Young People's Question Time. It's a sort of condescending thing that the BBC does. Oh, it's Young People's Question Time. Let's have somebody who doesn't actually know anything about politics and make him the chairman of it. And I was ill at the time, and I really got stuck in over what was the then impending invasion of Libya. And I haven't seen it back, but I'm absolutely prepared to accept the texter's word that everything I said in it turned out to be right. So if anyone's got the time or the inclination to do it, please dig it out and put it on Question Time. I think we deserve to see it again. Now, there's so much more where that came from, but I'm not sure I've got very much time left to read many more. Look out for Panorama on Monday, because that's going to be a vicious assault on Corbyn, on McDonnell, on Momentum, on the Labour left, on the pro-Palestinian movement in the country. It's going to be a vicious assault, as only Panorama can do. And just remember that you paid for it. You paid for it on pain of imprisonment. The role of the state broadcaster in this debacle of a coup to overthrow the elected leader of the Labour Party, the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, will keep historians and media specialists busy for decades. It has been, and I've been in politics for well over 40 years, getting on, I'm sorry to tell you, for 50 years. I have never seen anything like this. My friends have tipped me off on SMS. It was Richard Bacon. He was the hip DJ with the college scarf tossed carelessly around his neck, condescendingly inviting the young people's audience on Young Voters Question Time to agree that war was the only answer. I wonder how he feels today. Richard Bacon, you were wrong. You've had your bacon. Mary Lindsay says, BBC inundated with complaints after Soubry and Campbell's attacks on McDonnell. I wonder how they'll respond with contempt. Stephen Purcell says, indeed it has. I was wondering when existing members of social media will be trolled, for then many more of us will be on their list. If that's the Stephen I know up in Glasgow, greetings to you, Stephen. Jay says, I beg to differ on your view that Trump will beat Clinton. Mad Trump, who should have gone to Dr. Phil instead of Dr. Oz. Jay, don't make the mistake of imagining that I want Donald Trump to win. I'm moving to the tip of the South Island of New Zealand if Donald Trump wins. And trust me, with all respect to my dear friend Edward, my producer, I don't want to have to move to the South Island of New Zealand because it's very, very cold. But it'll be hot as hell in the rest of the world if Trump makes it as president. It's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you, and if it was, then join me with another listener. Bring another listener in for next Friday, God willing.